It's a privilege to introduce to you Susan Millward. She is the Executive Officer from the Animal Welfare Institute in Washington, D.C. I'm sure you will enjoy this presentation because it has to do with the animal issues and the principal aspect that we are addressing in our seminar about conviviality. So, Professor Millward will speak about what her institution do in terms of educating people about animal welfare in general. Let me introduce our guest. Susan Millward, she's got an MBA from University of Wales, international business from the International Business School in Cardiff in the United Kingdom. Her career is quite outstanding. She is a research associate and ultimately director of the Marine Program, working on campaigns to reduce suffering and improve lives of marine animals. I had the opportunity to visit her institution 2 weeks ago, and they were very kind to explain me what they do. And now we are organizing like an international panel about how to deal with the hippo issue that we have now in Colombia. As a product of this seminar, we are trying to propose to our school a general panel with international guests, trying to gather information or ideas about how to handle the hippo issue that we are facing in Colombia right now.
So Susan, I am Susan Millward, the Executive Director of the Animal Welfare Institute in Washington, D.C. I'm British originally from England, but I've lived in the United States for 30 years. I'm really happy to be here today. It's very nice to meet everybody. A little about the history of the Animal Welfare Institute. It's a non-governmental organization. It's a charity. It was founded by a lady here called Christine Stevens in 1951 to alleviate suffering inflicted on animals by humans. In the early years, AWI sought to end the cruel treatment of animals in experimental laboratories. Over time, the work grew to take on other animal welfare causes. Now we work on many, many animals issues around the world. And we are privately funded. We get no government funding, which means we are very independent. We can make our own decisions and choose what work we do. We have members that give donations. We have people who leave money to AWI in their wills, and we get grants. We apply for and receive grants. It's a small organization. There's a board of directors who are volunteers. There's 7 people on the board. I'm the executive director. I'm a staff person. I am paid. We have a general counsel who is a lawyer. She is my right hand. We have a support staff with the bookkeeper. We have communications, people who are good at social media, press releases. We have a very good editor who's also a lawyer, which helps. We have a graphic designer, and we have someone who takes care of our members, the people who actually give us money, to give them information and to update their information and their records in our database. Then the organization is split into teams. So we have a farm animal team, a laboratory animal team, wildlife team, people who just work on legislation. We're based on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. We have a team that works on companion animals, dogs, cats, rabbits, mainly dogs. And then we have someone who works on humane education. And it's the humane education that I'm going to focus on today, given your work.
Susan se va a centrar en los aspectos que tienen que ver con la educación que vienen emprendiendo pues desde el instituto, en los aspectos que son centrales y pues como nos hizo ver en la transparencia, pues su organización es una organización muy independiente que no requiere dineros del gobierno, sino que fundamentalmente recibe donaciones, ¿sí? E inclusive producto de testamentos, ¿sí? Que dejan donaciones importantes para el instituto, y gracias a eso vamos a poder financiar también nuestro encuentro del próximo año.
AWI's mission through engagement, this is very important, the way we operate. We work with policymakers, scientists, industry, and the public to try, and we have some key aims here. So the first one is factory farms, and that's something that's quite big in the United States, where animals are all put together and basically treated as units rather than as actual animals. So we're working to abolish factory farms and support high welfare family farms, and then achieve humane slaughter for all animals that are raised for food. And that includes the transportation of the animals, so on farm, during transport, and at slaughter. Moving on to research, we're trying to improve the housing and the handling of animals used in research and encourage the development and implementation of alternatives to the experimentation of live animals. We are trying to end the use of cruel traps. This is particularly in the United States, and reform other brutal methods of capturing and killing wildlife. We preserve species threatened with extinction, and we protect wildlife from harmful exploitation, such as captive dolphins you see here in the dolphinariums that people pay money to go and see them do tricks. We don't believe that that's natural, and they shouldn't be in that situation. And also the destruction of critical habitats. We protect companion animals from cruelty and violence, including animals in commercial trade. We prevent injury and death of animals caused by harsh transport conditions in all of the above, including animals being transported for slaughter or for trade. Just the transportation of animals can be appalling. Okay, so the main programs we have, just to reiterate, and this is taken from our website, you can go and see this on our website: animals in laboratories, companion animals, farm animals, marine life, wildlife, and then humane education. And I'm going to focus now on the humane education. We advocate the teaching of compassion and empathy for all living beings and respect for their habitats. We believe this starts at an early age. We encourage educators to teach about biological and ecological processes in a manner that instills a great respect for animals and avoids methods that treats animals as disposable commodities. AWI encourages the use of cost-effective, reusable dissection alternatives, including interactive apps. Now that we're in the IT age, apps are just all over the place, and why not have them for learning about animals and the insides of animals in dissections, and also three-dimensional models. And in the past, we used to give grants to schools that would actually replace live animal experimentation for their students and dissection and use the models. But now it's so cheap that there's really not much incentive from a financial point of view. They can just do it because it's so easy.
Let me
Thank you.
translate that last sentence. Bueno, adicional a lo que se plantea aquí en esta transparencia, Susan dice que en el pasado pues, era muy costoso el utilizar modelos tridimensionales para exponer cómo se hacían disecciones con animales, que es algo que hoy en día es mucho más barato y pues obviamente no se sacrifican animales para enseñar este tipo de prácticas, y que gracias a los avances tecnológicos hoy en día estos modelos tridimensionales pues son económicos y pueden ser utilizados. Nosotros en la universidad tenemos al profesor Alejandro Castro, que desafortunadamente no nos acompañó el día de hoy, pero él es un experto en estos temas de cómo utilizar modelos para estudiar la anatomía de los animales o quizás el comportamiento en el departamento de biología, pero eso es algo que ya se está introduciendo en nuestras prácticas. En Colombia ya no se hace esas prácticas horrorosas de coger sapos y lagartijas y abrirlas en vivo, eso ya afortunadamente no se hace, pero entonces la idea es promover este tipo de modelos basados en los sistemas, en el diseño tecnológico, para que no tengamos que sacrificar animales en la educación.
AWI encourages thought and discussion about keeping animals in captivity for human entertainment. I showed you the picture of the dolphins earlier, but it's not just dolphins. It's other larger animals we just don't think are suited for captive facilities for human entertainment. I'm talking about big cats, giraffes, elephants, the larger animals that just need bigger spaces. We offer free publications to teachers, libraries, and animal shelters, including posters, brochures, lesson plans, and books. And we make them free of charge because we're trying to get people to think the way we think about animals. We provide free educational materials for children, teens, and adults that teach respect for animals and includes activities and lesson plans for different areas of animal education. We work internationally, but we try and make sure that all our arguments and all our works are based on science, so that there is no debate. It's fact. We use sound science to drive and support our protection efforts. We are accredited participants at many international fora, including the United Nations, CITES, which is the Convention on the International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora, the International Whaling Commission, and the Convention on Biological Diversity, and some others. And this here is my colleague, DJ Schubert. That's what he looks like. Yes, he knows him. And he's making an intervention, a public statement at an international meeting. We serve on country delegations, which means a country will invite us to be on their delegation as a subject matter expert. And that's very important and influential because it means that we can shape what that country may be saying at the meeting. And we provide technical input and substantive advice to countries. We work and coordinate with other non-governmental organizations to help develop our mutual goals and to bring synergy to promote international welfare issues. We find that it's better to work in numbers rather than at odds with other groups that are working in the same international fora. Okay.
Now,
the hippos.
The hippos issue. I had the opportunity to share with Susan and DJ Schubert about the hippo situation in Colombia. I explained the whole situation, I mean, how the government is trying to solve the problem, including the sacrifice of these animals, the cutting them, and the other option is to adopt them or send them back to Africa, among other proposals that we are discussing in our country. We also discuss the different kind of problems that people of the region are facing with the hippos, not only in terms of risk, but in terms of economy, because many people from the region are living thanks to the hippos. And now Susan will resume the problem that we discussed and some proposals we are trying to deal with the government and the panel we are organizing for next year.
So a case study, the Colombian hippos. You probably know all this, I don't know. 4 hippos were imported to the Pablo Escobar hacienda in 1994. 3 female, 1 male. Now there are over 100 animals, and by 2030, it is estimated that there will be more than 1,000 animals. Many are located along the Magdalena River system. They're native only to sub-Saharan Africa, so they shouldn't be here. They're not suited. Well, they are suited, but the land isn't suited to them. They're the heaviest land animals after elephants. They weigh up to 3,600 kilograms. They're big. They have a large appetite. The adults eat about 35 kilograms of grass each night and traveling up to 10 kilometers during that time. and they can run faster than a human. You can't beat a hippo. They live in groups of 10 to 30 individuals, typically. The herds have several adult females and males with one dominant male. The gestation period is about 8 months, so almost similar to humans. Mother hippos stay with their young, typically, unless the young is removed, for at least 18 months, 1.5 years. They breed usually in the dry season with births in the wet season, and they reproduce every other year. They are sexually mature, aged between 5 to 7. So, the problems. Devastation of the ecosystem that they're living in. They extirpate native species, pushing them out. Excrement pollution, which can impact fish and drinking water if that water is used for human consumption. Direct damage to livestock and property, physical danger to humans, and we have learned that baby hippos are being taken from their mothers and are being removed to other places to be sold, which is moving the problem elsewhere also. So, solutions. Culling, which is just deliberately killing them, has been suggested, either partially to kill maybe the males or total. But my understanding is that that's not a solution that the local people embrace. Anatomical castration, immunocontraception, capture and exportation to Africa, removal to zoos, confinement, or just leave them alone. Now I'll look at them. So culling, it's already happening, we understand, to some males, but most Colombians are against mass culling, at least the ones who live in the areas where the hippos are. Anatomical castration is very expensive. It's invasive, meaning they have to cut open the hippo, and it's very difficult to do. Immunocontraception is temporary. It's also very expensive, and it's also very difficult. And capture and exportation to Africa is, again, expensive, difficult, and there's huge potential for transmission of disease from here to Africa. Capture and removal to zoos, again, expensive, difficult, and potentially unethical because of the reasons I gave earlier, that they need a large space, and like elephants and giraffes and whales and dolphins, they need that space, so captivity may not be an ethical solution. Leave them alone. There's 1,000 hippos in 8 years, will be 100,000 plus hippos in 20 years. I mean, it's just, it's just not an option. So, our opinion, we think there's probably more than one solution. You can't just do everything. Immunocontraception should continue to be explored as a way to control them. But the biggest thing is that people need to work together. Right now, we understand that there's different plans in place to do different things, and we feel that people need to be talking to each other and working together so that they can use some of the different solutions, but together rather than just in isolation. So we think this involves the Colombian government, the local people out there, experts in hippos, in ecosystem damage, in working with local communities, and if we're looking at exporting them back to Africa, international authorities would have to be concerned. Communication, as I said, is essential, and education and raising awareness about the real threat that is being faced, not just for the people there, but the ecosystems, and ultimately the hippos themselves. That's key. Thank you.
All right. Let me add something else. The piece of research we are completing this time, including Dr. Viviana Villa, she's already graduated from our school. She went to the area And the purpose of this visit was to interview some local people to see how they deal right now with the problem. And what she found, as part of our research team, was that almost all population disagree with this idea, cooling them. And in the general public, which is part of the study, refused this idea too. I mean, 90% of the population disagree with this perspective, I mean, with this proposal. So, as Susan said, we need to organize an intergovernment and interinstitutional dialogue between different sectors of the population, of the people of Colombia. Experts in biology, experts in political public, in public policy, excuse me, and also they should consider the public in general, because in the general population of the country refuse this main idea of cooling them.
Gracias. Sí, el doctor Páramo nos cuenta que la doctora Viviana Villa, aquí presente, que se ha graduado recientemente de este doctorado y trabaja con el grupo de investigación del doctor Páramo, estuvo en la zona recientemente adelantando una investigación sobre el tema y se descubre que aproximadamente el 90% de las personas del área no están de acuerdo con el sacrificio de los animales. Entonces, lo que se propone, nos comenta el doctor Páramo, es que tiene que haber, como dice la doctora Susan, un trabajo entre instituciones, entre el gobierno, entre los legisladores, los directores de las políticas públicas, para lograr un consenso sobre lo que se puede hacer. En eso vamos en este momento.
Okay, now it's time for questions. You have any question for Susan?
¿Se ha evaluado el impacto en los ecosistemas de este tipo de especies? Y lo pregunto porque culturalmente en Colombia se le enseña la H a los niños con la figura del hipopótamo. Entonces, el hipopótamo es un animal lindo en este sentido. En parte eso explica que la gente no quiera matarlos, pero cuando vemos el impacto que estos animales producen en los ecosistemas tan frágiles de Colombia, yo creo que más de uno quisiera sacrificarlos.
Okay, the question is, do we know the impact that hippos have in our ecosystem? Normally, in our schools, children are taught the H letter with the image of hippo. And because of that, probably, people don't like to cooling them. Do we know how to, what's the impact of the hippos in the region?
I haven't been to the region. I've only heard from what other people have said. But I think this is one of the reasons why we need a workshop, because they're very large animals. They live in the river area. They eat a ton of the vegetation. It's not vegetation that humans are eating, but it's vegetation that other animals rely on, whether it's fish who live there, or other animals that need to actually sustain themselves by eating it or actually living in that vegetation. The excrement from the hippos may be helping, but I doubt it. And so the more animals that they are, it's actually probably causing pollution problems, is my guess. But that's why we need to have a workshop with experts who can actually quantify the damage that's being done now, and then the damage that's going to be done in 5 years, 10 years, when we're up to thousands and thousands of animals.
Let me translate. Lo que dice Susan es que ella no ha ido a la región, pero sabe que del impacto que los hipopótamos están creando en el ecosistema, porque contaminan el agua con las heces, son competitivos con otras especies, y que por esa razón es que estamos pensando en el panel de expertos, para que miremos el impacto ecológico que realmente están generando estos individuos a lo largo del río, y ver qué soluciones encontramos entre todos. Como yo lo mencionaba anteriormente, necesitamos el experto en peces, el experto en el manejo del recurso hídrico, el experto en mamíferos, el experto en hipos, y ella ha tenido la gentileza de enviarme un listado de personas expertas en estos campos que esperamos convocar para nuestro evento del próximo año.
What rights and freedoms of non-human animals are the most relevant at the time of creating the territorial plans or in public policies?
The what plans? I'm sorry.
The city plans.
Ah, okay. Yes, yes. Well, are you talking about companion animals?
Thinking
¿Estás
about-
hablando de animales de compañía? Yes.
See, so cats and dogs and okay. Because there's also the birds and things in the parks and things. But no, I think it's important for city planners when they're looking at redeveloping a region of a city or even creating new areas of a city to take into account the needs of people and also the people's pets, companion animals, so that they have places to go, places to exercise. Something that happens in the United States, they have these dog parks where they actually have fenced areas where people can take their dogs. You may know about them. Maybe they're here and they can let the dogs run free within the confined area. And they have rules to make sure that there's no fighting dogs or dangerous dogs. But that's one way I think it's a really good use of the open space, and it also attracts children to see that the animals are there, and it's just sort of and they're usually located by playgrounds and perhaps a pond or a lake or something, and so it's an integral part of that recreation area for humans and then also for animals. And then obviously another one is to have nice spaces where dogs can be walked in public parks.
Que en efecto es muy importante que cuando la ciudad vaya creciendo, es importante tener presente pues que hay que crear espacios para los animales, para las especies animales no humanas, y que, por ejemplo, en los Estados Unidos se han venido creando parques, encerramientos dentro de los parques para los perros, con una señalética, por ejemplo, que prohíbe introducir perros que sean violentos, agresivos, que haya peleas entre los animales, bajo la supervisión de las personas, de los tenedores de los animales. Pero que sí, en efecto, hay que proyectar la ciudad considerando a los animales dentro del espacio urbano, pero no solamente el caso de perros, sino también en general de aves y demás especies. Es importante tenerlas en consideración en los planes urbanos.
¿Existe algún antecedente de un problema similar en otro lugar como el de los hipopótamos y pues cómo se ha tratado ese antecedente?
Very good question. Is there any other like the hippos we have here in a different country?
Yes. That's it. See. No.
And how they solve the problem?
It's there's a big problem in an island called Guam in the Pacific, and I used to live there. It's a long story, but I was there for 2 years, and it's not a problem with hippos, but it's a problem with snakes. The brown tree snake was an accidental visitor to the island. Well, 2. It had to be 2, and in a very short period of time, they overran the whole island. And I've seen many, you see them, there's thousands and thousands and thousands, and it's a very small island. It's like 30 miles wide and about 5 miles wide. And so the local birds have been pushed out. They've been killed because the snakes just eat the eggs. And so the birds, the native birds have disappeared. Other animals have just been wiped out because of this one species, and they can't get rid of them. They try. They put bait down with poison, and they kill some of the snakes, but it's too late. And similarly, I think in Australia, the British, my country, imported animals to get rid of indigenous, local animals there because they were trying to create, grow crops and things, and now those animals have become a huge, huge problem in Australia. It's humans messing with nature, unfortunately, and it's always down to us, and so it's up to us then to try and fix it.
Sí, que en efecto hay casos, particularmente quiere mencionar una experiencia que ella vivió en Guam, donde estuvo viviendo en la isla de Guam, en el Pacífico, donde se introdujeron serpientes, y las serpientes fueron acabando con los nidos de los pájaros y, bueno, y gran cantidad de otros animales en la isla, y que es una isla muy pequeña, entonces el impacto fue muy grande. Pero también en el caso de los australianos, muchas personas de Inglaterra llevaron una gran cantidad de especies animales al continente isla y pues han creado un problema muy serio en los ecosistemas. But my question is how they solved the problem.
Right. I think that's part of the part of the issue. It's really hard to solve these problems once they've started. With Guam, they're controlling the population of snakes. They're not eradicating the snakes. And with there's a bird called the Guam rail, which is a little ground bird. They were down to around 12 animals, and so they captured them, the ones that were left, to captive breed them, knowing that if they didn't, they would go extinct. So that's how they're dealing with it. It's not really solving the problem. I mean, the plan ultimately there is to get rid of all the snakes and reintroduce the Guam rail back to the island, but I think it's going to take decades.
Okay. Very interesting answer. Muy interesante la respuesta. Ella lo que dice que es que en Guam, que es decir, que no es un problema fácil de resolver, es muy complejo, que en el caso particular de Guam lo que hicieron fue eliminar algunas serpientes, pero que no se ha podido eliminar del todo, y que por ejemplo, ciertas aves que quedaron en proceso de extinción debido precisamente a la introducción de estas serpientes, fueron recogidas y protegidas porque si no las iban a extinguir, ¿sí? Entonces es un problema complejo que no se resuelve, y eso lo discutimos en Washington. No crean ustedes que se resuelve en un año o dos. Lo que dice el experto DJ Schubert, él me decía, mire, esto es una cosa que puede tomar 10 años, así que prepárense para el problema que van a tener y la búsqueda de la solución, pero no es sencilla ni es a corto plazo. Otra pregunta. En Colombia, dice Dolly, pues la situación es igualmente compleja porque las personas suelen detestar, odiar las serpientes, pero amar a los hipos, y entonces eso hace que, como decía Iván, la gente se sienta apegada emocionalmente a los hipopótamos porque les parecen animales tiernos y porque, digamos, hasta el momento no ha habido ningún incidente muy serio con ninguna persona, pero en el momento en que empiecen a atacar, o sea, crezcan en demasía, pues seguramente va a haber incidentes con los pescadores. Entonces, pues hay que pensar en una solución que va a tomar tiempo. ¿Qué opinan ustedes, por ejemplo, de la idea de sacrificar algunos machos cada año? Y, segunda pregunta, asumiendo que eso tengamos que hacerlo, ¿cuál creen ustedes que sea el papel de la educación a ese respecto? Porque ya lo dijimos, el 90% de la población que hemos venido entrevistando con Viviana rechaza la idea de sacrificarlos, pero parece que parte de la solución es esa. La solución tiene que ser mancomunada de varios sectores, ¿no es cierto? Pero una de esas soluciones es desde la perspectiva de la educación. ¿En qué sentido, cómo deberíamos orientar la educación para las personas que viven de los hipopótamos? What I'm saying is that the problem is quite complex, but we need to address the issue in terms of education too. And which topics should we consider in terms of how to educate people to deal with the problem?
No sé si de pronto, teniendo en cuenta que el profesor Páramo, uno de los elementos tanto la parte educativa como la parte de la solución es la responsabilidad humana de introducir esas especies foráneas
digamos, esos ambientes que obviamente terminan irrumpiendo y trayendo todo este tipo de complejidades. Lo digo porque de alguna manera parece que en el discurso la culpa fuera de los hipopótamos, ¿no? ¿Sí? O sea, que los hipopótamos están causando ciertos problemas de devastación, problemas ecológicos, problemas incluso que en algún tiempo el profesor Páramo lo dice, van a ser de tipos económicos para las poblaciones, y no ha sido un problema de los hipopótamos, porque ellos no decidieron entrar, sino un problema causado por los mismos humanos. Entonces, creo que, y esa era una de las preguntas que les quería hacer a la doctora, ¿cuáles son como los mayores retos a los cuales se enfrentan cuando tienen que hablar precisamente de la convivencia entre seres humanos y animales no humanos? Es decir, ¿cuáles son esos puntos más álgidos cuando tenemos que discutir los derechos de unos y de otros y cómo debe girar la convivencia para precisamente tomar decisiones de ese tipo, como sacrificar a cierta parte de una especie cuando ellos no han sido responsables de lo que está sucediendo y ellos tengan que asumir un poco eso?
Okay, let me try to tratar de traducir. Okay, it's not a simple question. What Edgar is saying is that the responsibility is not the hippos. The responsibility is from humans who try to introduce these species in different ecosystems. How to deal with the conviviality between animals and humans. The problem is not the hippos because they didn't decide to come to Colombia.
Right.
The problem was created by the government who allowed this guy, our drug dealer, to bring those animals from Africa. But now we have to find a solution between this connection between humans and animals. How to deal with that situation?
It's an excellent question, and it's an issue that we deal with a lot. We're an animal welfare organization, but we work with conservation organizations who want to, well, an example like the hippos, there's an island off the coast of California where humans brought goats onto the island just for farming. There was people who lived there, and they brought the goats, and the goats just ate everything, and then they pushed out the local species of animals that lived on the island. And so the conservation groups just wanted to go in and just kill all the goats. And we were like, well, hang on, the goats, it wasn't their fault. They don't, it was our fault for bringing the goats onto the island. And so it's a similar situation, I think. And that's where it's really tough because we're a welfare organization, but we also have a conservation mind as well. And that's why we want the best outcome. And that's why I'm not a huge fan of the killing of the hippos. And it may be that in time, there's a certain number of hippos that might be sustainable if they're contained in an area, but you need to control that population. I think having an uncontrolled population is just passing the problem to our children and our grandchildren.
Sí, pues que la pregunta es excelente, que el problema no es fácil de resolver, que en una isla cerca de California pasó lo mismo. Ella no está de acuerdo con la idea de sacrificar a los animales, pero quizás tenga que hacerse con algunos, pero que sí que tiene que buscarse la forma de mediar entre los distintos sectores, ¿sí? Porque como ONG o NGO que se preocupa por el bienestar de los animales, pues tienen que buscar la protección de la especie, pero igualmente tratar de resolver el problema que tienen las comunidades. What kind of animal is the goat?
A goat.
Goat. Ah, goat, cabras. Ok, sí. Sí, las cabras fueron eliminando las demás especies de la isla. Sí. Entonces, bueno, nosotros vemos eso permanentemente. But I'd like to ask you another question regarding this ecosystem impact from the hippos. Did you know that cows create more problems than hippos?
They create, yeah.
Yes, in Colombia we have lot of hectáreas, un montón de hectáreas, plenty, llenas de vacas. Y las vacas están creando más impacto en los ecosistemas que los mismos hipopótamos. Ese es otro asunto que habrá que abordar dentro de nuestro panel de expertos. All right, you have something to say about this impact of cows in the
Well,
countries?
yes, somewhat. We are not a vegetarian or a vegan organization, although most of the people who work in my organization do not eat meat. So it's, and that's partly why, one of the reasons, aside from the welfare issue, that we oppose factory farming, where the animals are just all herded in together and there's just thousands and thousands of them. It's very bad for the welfare, but also bad for the environment, and all the methane that's produced. I mean, it's just this. It's just the family farming. If I mean, that's our goal. Yeah, I guess our goal. If people choose to eat meat, then we promote family farms where the animals are raised humanely and there's less of them. Oh, sorry.
Lo que ellos están promoviendo en el Instituto, ellos son veganos, vegetarianos, están en desacuerdo con la comida, sacrificar a los animales para comérselos, pero que saben que la realidad es diferente, pero que por el contrario, digamos, o en consecuencia con eso, lo que están buscando es promover granjas familiares, no esa industrialización de los animales, sino más bien pequeñas granjas donde los animales puedan estar en mejores condiciones. Go ahead.
And so having a smaller unit, the family farms, there's fewer animals, they're treated better, they have more space, and apparently the meat will taste better from that as well, and then it's just minimizing, I mean, in the US and I think maybe elsewhere, there's this move to have like meatless Mondays. I don't know if you've heard of that. No. Where there's groups. No, okay. There are groups that say, okay, if you don't eat meat on one day a week, just to try and get people to understand that it's okay, you can still eat well without eating meat. And so it's a move to try and reduce the amount of meat that people eat.
Ok, que pues en relación con esta idea de promover las granjas familiares, lo que busca es promover el bienestar de los animales, es decir, que tengan más espacio, que no estén bajo condiciones de estrés, pero que también en los Estados Unidos se viene promoviendo que no se coma la carne los lunes, y entonces que de esa manera, pues entonces el impacto, digámoslo así, de crear vacas o de consumir carne, pues puede ser menor. Entonces que hay una campaña educativa orientada a que la gente al menos un día a la semana, los lunes, no coma carne. Okay, y que eso es una forma de comenzar a cambiar a las personas. Any other question? ¿Alguna otra pregunta? A ver, Dolly.
Talking about your question that you before about the education, I think the social media, the mass media has a lot to do in the education.
Yes.
But I think that sometimes, for example, here in Colombia with the hippos, we have a big problem because some of the people who appear in that social media are animalists. Animals is the name?
Yeah, animalist
Yes.
group.
Right?
Yes.
And I think sometimes they promote and they don't say really that these species are dangerous for the ecosystem. I think sometimes they don't say all the truth about it.
Right.
So they want to protect the animals, but sometimes I think they do the opposite. So I don't know if you think, what do you think about it?
A ver, déjenme traducir lo que dijo Dolly. Básicamente, en relación con la pregunta que yo hice, los medios tienen un papel muy importante en educar a las personas frente al bienestar animal. Sin embargo, que no siempre lo hacen bien, digamos, no están bien informados. En eso coincido contigo. No está bien orientada la información que se suministra en los medios acerca de cómo buscar el bienestar de los animales. ¿Qué piensa Susan al respecto? ¿Cómo deberían actuar los medios en relación con la educación de las personas?
Well, I think it's really important that people are given all the information so that they can make the right decision about where they want to fall on the issue. And I don't think it helps if people are giving them people are only getting some information. And it's the same in any issue, whether it's politics or anything. The more information you have, then you can make a balanced judgment, but you can't make that judgment if you don't have the full picture. And that's why I think that we've become quite a respected organization, because back to the science, we don't, we don't give opinion, we just can back up our statements with science. And I think that's what is important in this issue particularly, and education is everything.
Esa es una respuesta muy importante, porque lo que está diciendo Susan es que en efecto las personas tienen que estar bien informadas y que, como en el caso de su institución, la información tiene que estar suministrada a la población basada en hechos científicos. Y esa es una respuesta muy importante precisamente para nuestro seminario, que trabaja con estudiantes que se están formando en los más altos niveles académicos. Eso es lo que ella está diciendo, es importante tomar decisiones sobre la mejor evidencia disponible. Alejandro.
Sí, hablando de otro tema, en Colombia se ganado y carne de vaca para exportar a todo el mundo. Y las vacas se llevan vivas en barcos que atraviesan todo el océano hasta Europa. ¿Qué piensa la Fundación sobre esa práctica y si se ha pronunciado para decir algo diferente? Porque es un evidente maltrato.
We keep cows and sell them for many other countries, including Europe's countries. They are transported alive, crossing the ocean. What do your organization think about this problem?
Yeah, I'm glad you raised that, because it is that transportation. That's why I mentioned it. It's from on-farm transport to the slaughter. The transport is really important, and traveling those long distances. I mean, it can be just appalling, especially if they're confined. And I don't know what sort of monitoring they have, whether they have any shade, whether there's cover. In the US, there's a law called the 28-hour rule, where they don't have to provide breaks or food for the animals for 28 hours, and we think that's way too long for an animal to go without food and water when it's being transported somewhere. So I can only imagine the trip from Colombia to Europe. I don't know how. It's way longer than that. So it's a huge issue. It's a huge issue.
Sí, que es un asunto realmente grande, preocupante, que en los Estados Unidos, por ejemplo, para transportar animales, vacas aguantan hasta 28 horas sin comer, que no se alcanza a imaginar cómo será el transporte de vacas en unos espacios reducidos atravesando el Atlántico vivos. Pues sí, que es un asunto preocupante. Okay, a final question.
De la especie. Si es una especie, por ejemplo, me refiero a insectos, mamíferos, anfibios, existen diferentes categorías dependiendo de la evaluación que le tenga el humano a dicha especie.
Is there do you differentiate between species considering the welfare of this kind of species, let's say insects, mammals, fish? Do you have policies for this kind of differentiation of species?
Right, that's a really good question, and it's one that it's really hard to answer. But generally, coming back to my slide about the animals being confined for public entertainment, we tend to focus on the species that need more room in the wild. So we wouldn't oppose the keeping of ant farms, for instance, as for children's education. You know, the ant farms, I don't know, yeah. but where do you draw the line? You know, is an ant is smaller than a mouse, is smaller than, you know, where it's very hard. That's why it's such a hard question to answer. And I think it comes back to looking at the natural environment of that animal and what it needs to be a happy individual or a happy colony for ants. And then if you can replicate that, okay, but if you can't, then they don't belong in captivity.
Es una pregunta difícil, porque no hay forma de establecer como la línea divisoria entre una y otra frente a qué tipo de espacios, por ejemplo, necesitan. Pensando, por ejemplo, en cuáles deberían ser las características de las hormigas o frente a otro tipo de especies. No es una pregunta que se pueda resolver fácilmente. Okay, I think this is the end, and we have to thank Susan for her conference and taking her time to came from Washington to visit us in Colombia. So if you want to go in deep into her institution, don't hesitate to contact her. So I think it's time for an applause to Susan. So your English is very good.